You did come to a unanimous vote. However, I have to pick up on what you said. You said the vote was 96-0. There's more than 96 senators. Some people were missing.
Yeah, no, we've got several senators who are out on quarantine, and where that started from was a few days ago. Rand Paul tested positive for the coronavirus.
That's right.
And he had been in D.C. the whole week, and actually the way we found out about it, so we were meeting every day for lunch, the Republican senators, and it was interesting. We shifted. We normally meet in a room in the Capitol called the Mansfield Room, and it's and actually, by the way, the minority meets in the LBJ room, which is a smaller room, but the Mansfield room is bigger. So it's one of the things. It was nice in 2014 when we became the majority. We switched our lunchrooms and got to a bigger room.
That's a nice perk.
But when coronavirus hit, we all wanted to social distance. And so the Mansfield room we decided was too small. So we were meeting instead in a conference room, and we moved actually to a couple of different conference rooms that were sort of almost like big auditoriums in one of the Senate office buildings. And so we were in one of those big auditoriums where the acoustics were terrible. It's hard for everyone to hear because it's not good acoustics. But Mitch, every day we were meeting for lunch, and we'd have often a 2-3 hour lunch because it would be a progress report on the negotiations of the bill. And there were different committees that were working on different portions of the bill. So the people would stand up and say, all right, here's what's going on with this. And we'd ask questions and we'd debate back and forth. And so a few days ago, we're there and Mitch is talking, and he just kind of matter of fact says, and so Rand Paul just tested positive for coronavirus. And we're all sitting there going, what the what? Like,
yeah,
I mean,
it's big news.
And Mitch just very matter of fact mentions it and keeps going on. And a whole bunch of seconds. Hold on a second. Can you rewind that tape and play it again? And so it was, and Rand had been at the Senate. He had been that morning at the Senate gym. He'd been swimming in the pool.
Oh, wow.
I got to say, I don't think I've ever seen my colleagues as pissed off
right.
as they were. Like, he had just gotten the positive test results, and then they were pretty angry that he hadn't self-quarantined. Now, Rand said he wasn't sick. He had no symptoms. He hadn't come in direct contact with the he was at a gathering with people who were sick, but he didn't come in direct contact with them. I understand his reasoning. I can tell you people were freaked out. And so I remember we're sitting there going, okay, well, what do we do? I mean, there are 53 Republicans. The immediate question, all right, are we all quarantined? Like, as you know, I spent 11 days in self-quarantine in Houston.
Right.
And I'm like, well, all of us have been here with Rand. What does this mean now? And what ended up happening is within an hour or two people self-quarantined as a result, Mike Lee and Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
And the reason is at lunch, they had sat on either side of Rand. They had been at lunch with him. They'd sat next to him. They'd been there for a couple hours. And so they decided neither of them are feeling sick. I talked to both Mike and Mitt this week after they quarantined. They both said they were feeling great. But they self-quarantined because they'd sat next to Rand and spent a couple of hours. You know, I thought about it, but as it so happened this past week, I just didn't run into Rand. In fact, I didn't know he was around. I'll often sit next to him at lunch. I just didn't happen to this week. So
it was a good week not to sit next to Rand Paul, but it puts you in a tough position because as you're all sitting there and Leader McConnell tells you, oh, by the way, one of your colleagues has coronavirus, you know, it's a pretty small club there in the U.S. Senate. You're all voting on this very important legislation. If all of the Republicans self-quarantined, what happens to the bill?
That was a real issue, and I think that's one of the reasons why all of us said, let's move forward and get this done quickly and get the hell out of here. Everyone's flying home tomorrow morning.
Right.
And the Senate is not expected to be in session for several weeks. But, you know, look, if you look at the Senate, there are a lot of people in their 70s and 80s. I mean, you want to talk about a potentially vulnerable population.
Yeah.
We're trying to stay away from each other. We're trying to, like, social distance. People are pouring hand sanitizer like crazy. But, you know, Rand and Rand and I traded texts. He said he's feeling good and feeling healthy. But you remember Rand, what was it, a year or two ago?
That's right.
His neighbor tackled him, broke 6 ribs. The ribs punctured his lungs. He got pneumonia. and they did surgery and removed part of his lung. And so what's scary about this is Rand with part of his lung removed is in a vulnerable position where he's more vulnerable if he gets COVID-19. If he gets sick, he's potentially more vulnerable. And so he's obviously taking it seriously, but all of us are worried and praying for Rand.